Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where writers sit around drinking tasty beverages to talk about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. There will be rants and raves and opinions that may not agree but are lovingly delivered. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Your pro fan base today is Chaz and Count Brenchley. This is episode 187, interview with Sean Kernan. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
And we're happy to have you here. So one of the reasons I invited you is you're a slightly different kind of writer than we normally have, which are traditionally books and magazine writers, in that you write in the cloud. But we will get to that in a minute. But I wanted to kind of start from the beginning. So you had a job once, right? 9 to 5 kind?
Yeah, more like the 8 to 7 kind. But yeah, I worked for years as a financial analyst, and that was what I expected to be doing for the majority of my working life until a little writing hobby turned from being a side thing into something much more, basically.
So you're known as the guy from Quora. So can you tell us a little bit about what Quora is and how you got that nickname?
Well, so basically what happened was I was writing, I was working, and then I realized I needed a hobby on the side. And I'm one of these people who Googles lots of questions, and I'm a very curious person, and it kept taking me to Quora. And Quora is like a Facebook for questions and answers, and is actually founded by the first CTO of Facebook, Adam D'Angelo. So when you go to this feed, you see a sort of cascading feed where you can see random people's answers, and you're given prompts right there in front of you. And it was a very easy, bite-sized way to get started with writing. Quora's goal is to share all the world's knowledge. And I think for someone like me, who has always been a big reader and I have gobbled up science fiction and fantasy books my whole life and often thought about writing, this was a really easy way to just get started. You didn't have the intimidation factor of writing a whole book. And I didn't actually get into it with some grand ambition of becoming some writer that people knew, or even with the goal of making money. I mean, it was just, I felt a calling to come to the keyboard, and it became an obsession. I would get home from work and just immediately go to my keyboard and start writing. And I don't know, it snowballed from there. I fell in love with it.
Oh, that's great. Did you actually make money on Quora at the time? Because I started, before I got married, I was Karen Williams, there's a million Karen Williams. But so I was on Quora for a while and answered some questions and so on. And I was actually pleased because there didn't seem to be any, or very much, I suppose, any bullying or fighting or that kind of thing. But maybe I was the area I was answering questions in. But I noticed now, I went back and looked, and they're actually monetizing it. When and how did that happen?
So this is the second iteration of monetization. So if we go back, I started in 2016 on Quora. And at that time, there was not really any ways to make money with internet writing unless you had a website that was really doing well with SEO, or you had some type of niche that was getting traffic and converting sales. This whole thing about getting paid for online writing is a relatively new thing. And it was first sort of innovated with Medium when they launched their Medium Partner Program. And so Quora wanted to, it's funny how these tech companies are such copycats. The minute one of them proves a model works with monetization, there's just an avalanche of them. And then there's like a pullback, and some realize they're not that good at it. So the first monetization model was the Quora Partner Program, and they would pay you to ask questions on the site. Now, that was the first way I started making money, and I started making real money. I mean, several thousand a month as it sort of built up. And that's, you can have some fun with that. And I started building a little nest egg. And, I wasn't making a ton of money, but it was enough to keep my attention. And so that program eventually ended a couple years after that, and it was replaced with the Quora Plus program, which is a model that basically mimics the Medium setup. So as you know, with Medium, it's all of the paying readers pay their $5. That goes into this giant pool, which the writers then compete for, and we get about half of that $5 if we get. So I got to break it down a little more than that. So basically, if you spend an hour reading on Medium in a given month, $2.50 of your money will be distributed on a percentage basis to wherever that hour was spent. So we writers compete for that money. On Quora, it's a very similar setup. There's a pool of money that goes into this big cloud and then is redistributed to writers. Their model is a good bit weaker than Medium's because Quora is a lot of different things. It's focused on expertise and all these different value adds, whereas Medium is a very writer-centric monetization model. Now, Quora Plus has gotten better for me in recent times. The money's not crazy good, but it's something. And the problem is you have to really move a lot of views in order to make it worth your time. And honestly, the only reason it probably works for me is because I have so much longevity there and a following.
Are you effectively being paid to ask questions here on Quora or to give answers?
So initially it was questions. And they have discontinued the question program.
Yeah, got you.
No, so I have a question though on the answers. You probably were just about to tell me this. But is it based on people upvoting you, or is it actually based on the answer being correct?
Oh, that would be nice. Well, I think on your second question about it being correct, I think that's a harder. So when you're dealing with monetization at scale, it's devilishly hard to create a system that works the way you want it to. Like, how do you define correct? Well, they have sometimes they do these questions at the bottom of the answer. Was this answer helpful? They find that that's one way of measuring accuracy. But to your question, no, accuracy is not really the thing that's being paid. It's are you getting reads from actual Quora Plus paying members? So are you converting and bringing in revenue? So they're trying to incentivize us playing a part in generating revenue for the platform, and then they just split some of that because it's a lower risk way of monetizing content than just flat paying them and hoping it works out. But no, accuracy. But at the end of the day, I think the system does sort itself out to some extent. If you become known as a charlatan, you're going to lose a lot of readers. Probably not as many as you should, but it will hurt you in the long run and hurt your credibility. So I hope that answers.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
No. Please feel free to interrupt anytime because I do that sometimes too because I don't want to forget the question I had. So just feel free to jump in.
Okay. Actually, so we interrupted you. So do you remember where you were? Well, you were still explaining more about Quora. What my experience was when I went back to Quora, I just don't like it because I don't like the setup and I don't understand. They've got, instead of just question, answer, they also have, I don't know, these kind of tents where someone says, okay, I've set up, one thing that annoys the hell out of me is this guy has set himself up as Mr. Multiple Sclerosis expert. Okay.
Oh God.
And so all the multiple, and I don't know how he does this, but the questions he siphons them into his little tent. And I think you probably know the real word for the little tents that these guys are creating.
The space?
The space, yes. The space is. So he's got the space. But he annoys me because he used to remove things that I would say, because I had multiple sclerosis for several years, and I had a well-known therapy to reboot one's immune system, which in 70% of MS cases, if you do that, the MS goes away. Okay. Mm-hmm. There is it's not a cure exactly, because the damage is still there, but I don't have new damage, and it's a really big deal. Mm-hmm. And I would post about this and he would remove it. And now he's stopped. I think other people have been posting the same kinds of things. So he stopped removing those, and he actually mentions it on the side now. Anyway, but they have changed it so that they have these kinds of people who can do that.
Set up a space and annex all the questions. You mean?
Yeah, and kind of manage things more. It's less of a Wild West space now.
So can I comment on that? I think one of the things you have to understand is there's a difference between questions and Quora, and space questions are like their own little country. You can, and they do have their own little dictators sometimes. You can actually, the better thing to do is just answer regular Quora questions, not questions in the space. Because if you were to answer MS questions just that are on the site, it would still distribute those answers to people with an interest in that subject matter. So I think they haven't done a great job of drawing a DMZ line between spaces and actual Quora questions, because it can look like they're the same thing. But yes, there is there is like issues with content moderation, and sort of the way some of these spaces are run is a little problematic at times as well.
Well, thanks. That clears it up for me anyway.
Yeah, no, he's not the normal moderation, and honestly, there's a complete lack of moderation on Quora right now. I mean, it feels like they have like one or two people doing it, because they've, anytime these platforms have issues with revenue and they're losing money, the first thing they cut is moderation. And like even on Facebook right now, one of the things that happened is they did all these layoffs, and so they immediately tried to automate their moderation system, and you got like millions of false positives. I've had my account suspended 3 times, and I'm like the least controversial Facebook, right? I mean, I chat with my friends, I look at like dog pictures, I don't do anything. And so moderation that could be another wormhole we can go down maybe at a later date too.
Yeah.
So,
those dogs, don't you like beagles? Come on, Sean.
my neighbor had a beagle, and she let it out in the middle of the night, and it would bark, and those barks carry, and they cut through stone basically and wake you up. But I do like them otherwise when they're not waking me up.
Okay, good. All right. Well, then you can go back on Quora then.
Okay, thank you.
Talk about beagles. So you made the move then, though, to Medium.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which is where I encountered you for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And you are one of their top revenue earners, or top, you're listed as the top person in several subjects. And so tell me about how you write something every day. Okay. And we're not talking a little Quora answer. We're talking a very nice essay, beginning, middle, end, makes a point,
Mm-hmm.
has a good starting section, has a good ending section. Your high school English teacher would be more than proud of you. How did this come about? What was your journey? How did you start on Medium? And then how do you do that every day?
Yeah. So this all sort of coincides with some of the other things I mentioned. So when I was working as a financial analyst, I mean, I never loved it. I did it, and it just felt like the thing I was supposed to do because I was good at math, and I just sort of went in that direction. And when I started writing on the side, I started to like realize I really didn't enjoy what I was doing at the office. And I hate to make this analogy, but it's sort of like having an affair to realize you weren't happy in your marriage. And not that I have, but that's kind of what happened. I started writing in about 3 years, I would say two to 3 years after I started. I eventually went in and quit my job. Now, at this point, I had saved up a good chunk of change from the Quora question program. And at that point, they were paying decently, like not as much as I was making in finance, but it was a few thousand a month. And, you can survive on that. And so I just had a bad boss. I was experiencing all the worst things about corporate, all the cliches and the micromanagement. And so one day I put in my 2 weeks. And I remember I was, it was kind of this very emotional, difficult decision because it's such a major life change. And my plan was I'm going to quit this job and I'm going to give it 6 months and we'll see what happens. I've got enough money to get by. Even if I make $0 for the first 6 months, let's just see what happens. So 2 days, I would say it was a week. It was a week after I quit my job. Quora cut the question earnings for us in half. So I immediately was down to like not a survivable income. And I had this sort of, holy crap moment where I was like, have I made a horrible decision here? And so I had heard of Medium, oddly enough, because when back in those days, Quora was heavily regulated and you used your real name and people got banned all the time. Like really well-known writers just got the ban hammer and they were done. And that was a really scary thing for writers because it was the only platform for a lot of us. Well, a lot of them would go to Medium because that was like their little, their chance to revive themselves. And a lot of times it didn't work out. but I figured I would go to Medium and just see if I could get a second life there. And I was starting from scratch again. You don't have deadlines in this business. Like, you're not dealing with publishers and you don't have to have a final copy, but you are dealing with like paychecks and money, and that has its own sort of urgency. And when your back is against the wall, like it was in the beginning, it has a way of motivating you, because the thinking was, oh my God, I don't want to go back to the office. I really love writing. And so I really had like a profound, like 3 to 4 months of growth as a writer. I went to Medium and just really grinded and got feedback and looked up tips and asked for, advice. And I just felt so hungry. And luckily I got things moving and was able to start carving out a living there. Now, in terms of writing an article a day, I mean, here's the thing. This is all I do. I mean, I don't have anything else to do in the day. I don't have meetings. If you look at a fiction writer, there's plenty of fiction writers out there that churn out 1,000 words, 2,000 words a day. And if I'm just chiseling a 1,000 word essay, I mean, I feel like that's a doable goal. Sometimes it's a little more.
So yeah, I mean, I am a fiction writer, and yeah, I can do 1,000 words, 2,000 words a day, every day for months on end sometimes. But generally I'm writing a novel, which is, one big idea and a whole lot of little ideas and things getting tangled up and yada, yada. 1,000 word essay every day. I hate to ask this. Where do you get your ideas from?
And sorry if I rambled too much there earlier. I thank you for like jumping in. So it's like 20, I would say it's 25 articles a month, and I've slowed it down a little bit recently, but it is an aggressive schedule. I mean, I am an industrious type of writer. I definitely work at it, and the ideas come from everywhere. I generally will pay attention to my feelings when I'm just consuming content, like what interests me, like what is the thing that, because I feel like, I'm sure this happens with fiction too. If you're not bought into your own story, it's going to show, and the characters aren't going to pop to life quite as much. And the same thing is true with nonfiction and essay writing. Like you've got to feel something intrinsically about what you're going to write. It makes it that much easier. So in terms of ideas, so there is personal stories, like everyday things that I observe and that happen. I mean, I'm just constantly in record mode as I go about my day. I'm making notes of things that happen, and it's actually kind of amazing because I think people, they don't realize how many cool stories are around them. And I actually learned this from Stephen King. I listened to a lot of his interviews, and he talks about like some of the characters and things he comes up with. And there's so many like everyday interactions that are inspiring his horror novels. And that happens with a lot of authors. So yeah, that's one of them. And then I just consume and listen to podcasts. And I mean, this is kind of a dream job. I get to I get to listen to cool podcasts and watch videos on YouTube and learn about things. Or yeah, I mean, that's the short version.
I had a question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So, but you do have, when you sit down to write an essay, you are not sitting down every day and saying, how am I going to write this essay? I know you have a process. I know you have a format, a particular style of to write your essays, because you've shown it to me. Yeah, I don't want you to necessarily
reveal your secrets.
Reveal your secrets. I don't want you to reveal your secrets, but you have, because you are a professional writer who writes, at least 1,000 words every day, and gets paid a lot of money for it, and you write good stories. You know what you're doing. You're not. This isn't like a one-off Quora answer. You actually have developed. You have kind of the Sean Kernan style of stories, which is oddly enough not like Tim Denning's, for example.
Yeah. To Chaz's point, I mean, he brings up a really interesting thing. When he's writing a book, he's having to, and I'm going to work to your answer too. He's having to untangle plot lines and make sure he's not contradicting things. Writing an essay, it's a self-contained little story, and there's something kind of nice about that. I don't have to worry about, mixing up something in the story, or, because I don't have readers that are on the hunt for me contradicting myself or screwing some part of the story up. So it does make it easier to write these essays on their own, because there is I don't know. It's just you have a beginning, middle, and end, and there's a simplicity to that you can start and work with. In terms of crafting the essay, I think there's sort of I try to put a bit of myself in every article and make it relatable and find some sort of everyday thing that applies to the subject matter. So like I recently wrote about how everyone needs, there's rising numbers of people needing glasses, and nearsightedness is expected to reach 50% by 2050.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and it's already at like 80% in several Asian countries, and it has to do with not getting exposure to sunlight and too much screen time, basically, and looking at things up close. So in that case, like I didn't want it to just be a random essay about the glasses. How can I put myself in that? Well, I talked about getting LASIK surgery and how I fixed my eyes and how my first memory of my own eyes going bad in ninth grade and the experience of that. So that's one component of it. In terms of writing the essay, so dealing with online writers is a different animal. And I'm kind of envious of book writers in this regard, because there's the form factor of holding a book sort of lends more patience, I think, to readers. And when they're on their screen, they have so many other apps available and things to do. You don't really have that with a book. It's sort of nice and peaceful. And so you have to move things very quickly with an essay. So within the first 100 words, I always try to set the stage, show some type of scene, dangle some type of curiosity for the reader. And it's basically the setups and the payoffs that you're doing with books. And I try to just do that in a microcosm, essentially. And then, yeah, I try not to be too formulaic and mix things up. I think it's important to keep the readers guessing a little bit and leave them something that they can work with that'll make them better and happier, so to speak. We can drill deeper if there's anything more you want to know on that. So,
well, no, I was just thinking, because you do have, you have stories about your past and growing up in your family. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're not, doing, revealing secrets or whatever, but just kind of casual things. Like, I mean, you've got one of the coolest fathers. Okay.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so, things like that. And then you've got types of stories about different people in different jobs or whatever. You've got types of stories that, you've got these kind of, you've got clumps of different types of stories. Not everyone is entirely different. And I was wondering if you had ever thought or talked to anyone about collecting those and curating those a little bit into a book.
I haven't even, I was, I mentioned to you when we were interacting on LinkedIn a little bit, how I did come close to doing the book with Penguin. It sort of fell through in the 11th hour, typical publishers. But I just have been so caught up in doing my projects with online writing that I haven't been able to do that. But I would like to do some sort of compilation. I'm doing I'm doing the Perch thing too. So I think the first thing I might do is compile some writing articles and answers into sort of a short mini book to help aspiring writers that are trying to enter the online writing world. I think eventually I would like to write self-improvement or just some type of book for a publisher, but the deal would have to line itself up right. I've put in quite a few hours with publishers and gotten yanked around a bit. And so I got kind of fed up and, I needed to reset, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely I've written a book already for a client. I just need to get around to doing my own book.
I have a sideways question.
Sure.
You said you were good at maths,
mm-hmm.
and you sound very organized. I'm just wondering if your whole career here has been quantified, if you run metrics and keeps spreadsheets. And
that's a great question. So initially, to a fault, yes. I think that you can get, initially I would check my stats like all the time, and I would calculate my daily earnings, and it just became, and very quickly I realized, I quit finance. Why am I acting like a financial analyst still? I thought you loved being creative. Why don't we just like turn that button off? And I was so glad when I did that, because you do have to track how things perform to some extent with any profession. But yeah, stepping away from that and just leaning into the more creative side of writing and just embracing it more and stop, and to this day, I mean, I do worry about numbers and things, and, I have bills to pay too. But I contain it, so to speak. And I don't let my mind get too caught up in the numbers of it all. No. Good question though.
So you mentioned Perch. What is that?
Yeah. So it was so one of the cool things about this career is like when I've ever had, like, whenever, articles haven't been performing as well, or my paycheck has kind of gone down, and this happens a lot in this career. You have these ups and downs, and every time something sort of falls through, like something else falls out of the sky, and it feels good and sort of validating that it's like the universe telling me I'm on the right path, because I'll be kind of down and depressed about some opportunity falling through, and then something just pops up in my email. And that's exactly what this was. So Perch is a startup, and they're funded by Alex Ohanian, the co-founder of Reddit, and they want to become to Quora what Substack became to Medium. Huh. So if you don't know already, I mean, Substack is where a lot of journalists and writers go. It's a paid email newsletter and gives you access to specific people, and those people can write free from the clutches of editors and quote unquote cancel culture and the things that diminish their audience. So with Perch, it's a monthly paid subscription to an expert, essentially. And we are just in the alpha phase of this. There's only a handful of creators, and they give me a stipend each month, and I answer questions. And it's honestly, it's a neat change of pace. It's been, you can kind of get into sort of a circular pattern where you sort of do the same thing every day as a writer. So when there's a chance to do something a little different, it makes things more fun. So that's where it is right now. I'm just sort of farming subscribers and posting on social media. They're nice. They're I think it's 5 or 6 founders that started the company together, and yeah, so we'll see what comes of it.
So I had an email conversation with one of the founders. I'm a product manager, okay, mm-hmm. which means that I design products. That's what mm-hmm. I do. And he wanted my advice, okay, because
who was it? Who was it? Perch?
It was Perch. It was about Perch, because okay. I have no idea. I don't remember. I responded to your Perch thing, I think, mm-hmm. and your Perch message. I have no idea. That must have been. I have no idea. Mm-hmm. But how he ended up in the middle of this, and he wanted my advice because I followed you on Medium and wrote a little tiny bit for Medium and stuff, and was a product manager. And he kept asking me how much he should charge. And I kept saying, who are your customers? Know your customers. What do your customers want? And so we went back and forth 2 or 3 times, and I dumped him. So anyway, oops, maybe we should edit that out of this.
That's okay. We haven't named anyone. You're good.
Okay. I'm sure Perch is going to do fine because it's bite size. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's not a browser. It's something you can read on your phone.
Yeah.
That's what I like best about it is, it's got the same goodness. Okay. It's just, mm-hmm. You can do it faster.
Yeah. It's a bite size and it's easy to answer the questions. So I haven't actually paywalled mine yet, but I think my value prop will be something along the lines of basically offering like elevated priority to their question in my queue if they wanted something answered, and maybe just a form of patronage and maybe access to some type of community. And we'll see. It's an interesting product. I mean, I think the thing is, you have to learn to, when you're dealing with the masses, people don't part with their money easily. You really have to strategize and figure out exactly what they want. Fortunately, there is a very organic desire to learn to write. It's just like, it amazes me how many people have thought about writing. Because everyone took English class and had to write essays, and I'm sure they've read a book or two. One would hope a book or two they actually enjoyed. So there's always this like what if thing. And so, sometimes people will want to explore it. Even if it doesn't work out, they want to just have tried it once. I've had students who gave it a shot and they realized, I like the idea of writing, but writing is actually kind of hard. It's a lot of work.
Stephen Spender, the great British poet, reviewed the autobiography of another poet, and he said, so and so states frequently that he always wanted to be a poet. He never says that he wanted to write a poem.
That's funny. There's very much a distinction, right? And it's a journey. You know, what's the saying by Hemingway? He said, "There's nothing to writing. You just sit at the keyboard and bleed."
Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, it's nice when, and I'm sure this is true with your novels too, when the story just writes. I'm sure there's those days it writes itself. The dialogue just pops up, and you can see it all happening. And then you hit that first snag, and you're just like, oh God, what am I going to do? And it can be trying. And I have to be disciplined though, because in those moments, I can find myself wanting to do all these little chores and things to avoid writing. And, we call it shaving the yak. It's where I'll jump right on that. But first, let me shave this yak. And you just do these time wasting things. But it's so rewarding, once you get, when you finish something, you nailed it. And this was a good one. Not everything you write is as good as the next, but when you really nail a piece, that's one of the most rewarding feelings in this profession. There's fewer things are like that when you know in your heart, this is your best work.
We will put links to the podcast and the interesting things we mention on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. You have been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web support magic is performed by Deirdre Schwein, and our sound engineers are David Welsh and John Schmidt. Our entry music is Pretty Maids Milking a Cow, and our exit music is Breakfast with a Morning Person, both by Michael Ingberg. You can hear more from Michael Ingberg on minihatsmusic.com. Our sponsors are Jackal Designs in Australia, The Bean Scene in Sunnyvale, and Arm Street in Ukraine. And to all of you out there, thanks for listening.